I am Diane Sears. I'm the co-founder of Go for the Greens, and we want to welcome you to this really exciting webinar. This is the 5th in our series, and today we are going to be talking about resumes, how to build your resume, not only how to create the piece of paper that is your resume, but also what to do when you're in high school and college to build your resume, really build the activities that go on there to make you even more impressive to colleges and jobs that you're applying for. So I want to introduce my co-founder with Go for the Greens, and it's Cindy Chase.
Hello, team. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Cindy.
Diane. And very quickly, before I go off on into outer space and manage the operations, welcome everybody for being on the this webinar. It's super important, and I'm so excited about our guest speaker. I know that you will love our guest speaker. I had the opportunity to meet our guest speaker a few years ago at a conference, and I would have given a lot to have the opportunity when I was in college, way back before most of you, your parents ever even met each other, learn how to write a resume to get myself through college or a job. So I'll be listening, but you won't see me. I'm going to phase out, but thank you, and you'll see me back again at the end of the call. So thank you, Diane.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy. Okay, now I'd like to introduce, first actually I'm going to introduce our interviewers. Jasmine, why don't you tell us about yourself, where you go to school, where you live, and what level you are. And go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine. I'm currently a marketing student at UT Dallas, and I believe this is my 4th time moderating one of these webinars, and it's been super fun being able to interview our amazing speakers. Also, if you're new to the webinars, we have past sessions up on our YouTube, so feel free to check them out.
Okay, thank you so much, Jasmine. All right, and now Leslie, tell us about yourself and where you are.
Hi everyone, so my name is Leslie Garcia-Medina, and I'm a junior at Harmony Science Academy in Dallas. I've been with Go for the Greens for 2 years now, and I am beyond excited to see this organization grow. I'm currently president of Live Squad and member of Active Minds, and both these clubs we focus on the importance of mental health, and we strive for a greater movement in society. In my recent position as a junior advisor, I've received the wonderful opportunity to interview so many amazing people, and today that amazing opportunity continues. So yeah, that's it.
Oh, good, thank you. All right, and then Abe, we would like to introduce you. So I met you too at it was at a conference for women business owners a few years back. And so we're so happy that we can have you here today. Tell us where you are and what you do.
Of course. So thanks for having me, everyone. Leslie was actually the one to reach out and invite me in, and we met at Go for the Greens. So we've all somehow met in person, which is a lovely opportunity. So I am the tech director for a social media agency called The Social Element. What we specialize in doing is supporting big brands like Oreo and Nissan and Disney with things like their social media. And our tagline, which I think is really appropriate, is that we help create genuine human connections. And that's something that is especially interesting during these current times of how do we do human connections online when online is kind of the only medium we have at the moment. And so when Leslie reached out and said that there was an opportunity to speak to you all about making sure that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of graduating from high school or going into college or even leaving college, I jumped at the opportunity to get to speak a little bit more about my experience there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our interviewers, and I'll be behind the scenes if you need me. So thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Have fun, you all.
So Jasmine and I wanted to start off by giving a big thank you to Abe Blackburn for joining us today to talk about resume building. So it's definitely one of the most important topics when it comes to professional development. And we also wanted to wish you a happy birthday. We hope that you have a good day and that this can be a little...
It's a highlight. It's a highlight for sure.
So before we start, like Diane said earlier, we have the chat option there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them on there, and we'll make sure that you get them answered. So now, going into our topic. Personally, I always dread writing my resumes just because there's that pressure of making it amazing and spectacular to make it stand out when applying to internships, jobs, and I also dreaded it when doing my college applications. And so, however, to start us off, our first question is, what is a resume and why is it important?
Back to basics, I like it. So think of a resume as a snapshot of your experience to date. And this is a snapshot that changes every time, which is something I think we'll get into a little later on in terms of how important it is to adapt your resume and adapt the information that you're sending to either the college you're going to or the job you're applying for. But it's basically a one-pager or one sheet of information that tells a little bit more about your work experience, volunteering experience. All of these I like to put under a bucket of leadership experience. And it's just something so that your future employer or college admissions person can take a look at you. And of course, we know that no one is ever summarized fully on a piece of paper, but it's the start. It's something that allows you to do a quick introduction to yourself to hopefully get in the door and have a broader conversation with that person.
Thank you. So, Leslie, I believe you have a question.
Yes. So what are some important things that somebody needs to include in a resume? Like, do we need to include just simple responsibilities or achievements, stuff like that? What do you think is important that needs to be?
Sure. Sure. So I'm going to run through it kind of from top to bottom. And what I typically have done since I was around your age is always these kind of broad buckets. So at the very top, typically what you have is your name, first and foremost, and your contact information. You have to make sure that these are up to date. You want to have a phone number or your email. And typically I put my link to my LinkedIn profile as well. It's kind of my cheat sheet because I get to say anything that doesn't fit on the resume. I can just tell them to go and look at it online. And then maybe one or two lines about something about you that you really want to have stand out. So for example, when I graduated from my master's degree from the London School of Economics, I put as my kind of like title, LSE grad. And so it's the one thing to grab people's attention. Now that I'm a tech director, I'm also very involved in kind of digital literacy projects. So I've got a technical literacy leader as my kind of catchphrase. So I think it's a good way for people to, at your kind of like little business card at the top that says a little bit more about you. Some people include photos. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I think that, you know, you shouldn't necessarily be judged based on your photo first. It should be your achievements. So I don't put a photo, but so that first section is your name, contact information, and maybe one tidbit that you want to have stand out. Then the next section, which is usually the one that has the most information in it, is one that I like to call leadership experience. And so the great thing about this one is that you're not separating work experience from, say, volunteering experience or unpaid internship experience. What it really does is that it allows you to group everything together, because as we know, even if you weren't paid for it, doesn't mean that it isn't really relevant and really useful work experience. So I actually have always called it leadership experience. I'm a big fan of it, and I would recommend it as a quick way to be able to put everything in one group and not necessarily have to identify, you know, paid work experience if you don't have very much of that yet from volunteering experiences. You can put it all together. After leadership experience, I usually have my education section. So in this, you would list where you've been to school, where you've been to college, typically include grades, especially if they're good. Those are good things to kind of shout from the rooftops there. And if you have had the opportunity to have education in various places, do reflect that on there as well. So in my case, I've got a degree from Paris, from Lancaster in the UK, and from London in the UK, which is a really fun collection of cities, so I include the location as well. And then last but not least, at the very end of my resume, I have my section is called Languages and Digital Skills. But really, this is anywhere where you can have a little bit more fun. It's if there's any room left at the end of the page, you can say potentially the languages that you're fluent in, some interesting skill sets. So for example, if you're certified with Office Microsoft products, or you went on an amazing trek to the Himalayas with some leadership youth group, you know, anything there, basically your passions and skills is stuff that I would put down at there at the bottom. And we can go into a little bit more detail about any of these sections, but that's the broad outline. So to reiterate, it's your contact information, your leadership experience, your education, and then a kind of languages, skills, passions area.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So follow-up question.
Go for it.
You're good.
Oh, go ahead, Leslie, go ahead.
So I was just gonna ask, you mentioned that a page would be good for your resume. So how do you cut it down in an efficient way? Like if your resume is ever too wordy, how are you?
That's a great question. And so I will begin by saying that there are some industries and some jobs where a more detailed resume is essential. So for example, if you're going into higher academia, if you're applying for a PhD, for example, or you've got your PhD and you're going for postgrad experience, in that case, your resume should list all of your publications, for example. So in that case, it's almost a good thing for your resume to be several pages long. However, in most cases, I would say your resume needs to be one page. If you're not able to get it stuck to one page, then that to me, it highlights the question of whether you're being kind of concise and precise enough. Because to loop back on something I said earlier, you should have your CV adapted to the specific job or position that you're applying for every time. And I can guarantee to you that no matter how many wonderful things you've done, you will find some that are more relevant for the opportunity that you're going for at that time. And what you want to do is to have those opportunities and those leadership experiences really stand out. And they don't stand out if you've got 17 bullet points on a page. So it's really doing that kind of like cut and culling and editing process. Personally, what I have is I have a long document that lists everything that I've done. And then when I'm building a CV for a particular role or for a conference or for my education, for example, I basically run through and kind of like a menu. I say, yep, that's relevant. Yep, that's interesting. And then I rebuild my resume pretty much every time.
That's good. That's good. So going to the chat, Miss Barbatowski asked, is there something that you should not put on your resume?
That's a great question. And I think without necessarily going into the nitty-gritty detail, I think that that's your best judgment call. If it's something that you're proud of, if it's something that you feel like you would be able to speak to in a passionate way to an interviewer, I think that pretty much makes the cut. And so I think that passion makes you interesting, and little interesting tidbits of information make you interesting. And at the resume stage, it's all about standing out. So for example, the example I gave earlier about you trekked Machu Picchu, you know, if that's something you want to put on and you had a really great time and you really stepped into a leadership role and you were able to work on your team building skills, then absolutely go ahead. If, however, it was just kind of like a beach holiday with your parents and you spent the whole day tanning on the beach, maybe not something where you're going to be able to pull some valuable stories about yourself. Because ultimately, that's your objective here, is that every single bullet point, every single thing that you put on your resume should be kind of the launch point for a really interesting conversation about yourself with the interviewer or graduations person that you're speaking with. So you want to have an interesting story for all of them. So that can be a good barrier for entry. If it passes that, then I think it should go on.
Jasmine?
Yeah, thank you. So sort of to bounce back from Barb's question about what not to put on your resume, I want to ask, what are some mistakes one should avoid when building it?
Sure. So let's cover the basic one, which I think is anyone on this call. I know we've got some great representative from different brands and stuff and employers. You'll all know this as well, is grammar and spelling is just so important. And I wouldn't be doing any of you justice if I didn't hammer that home. So I think the first thing is that if I see a typo or a mistake on your CV, it really, as I'm actually in a position now where I am hiring people onto my team, and these things really matter to me. And I know that there are some people out there for whom it doesn't matter as much, but you don't know the person who's going to be reading your resume. So I would say don't gamble. This is a document where you really have every opportunity. You can send it when you want to. You have every opportunity to run it through several spell checks. Typically, you're going to have people, whether it be at your high school or your college, kind of resources, people who can help read through your documents. There are so many opportunities to make sure that little things like typos or grammatical errors don't pass through, that you should really be taking up on those. And so as a result, my expectation as an employer is that there be no typos. And to me, when I see a typo, even a small one, I'm like, maybe there's a low attention to detail here. I actually once had a resume land on my desk where the person made a typo in the sentence where they were talking about attention to detail. And that, unfortunately, immediately is like, oh, well. So I would really encourage you to take that really seriously. I think that's the one thing that should not be on your resume. So yeah, to circle back on Barbara's, that's something that shouldn't be on there. But Jasmine, to answer your question more broadly, I think things to look out for are kind of rambly points. As I kind of said, if it's not relevant to what you're going for, don't include it. If you're not going to be able to really shine when you talk about it, then maybe there's a better space for it on your LinkedIn page where you can be a little bit more verbose and extensive in what you put. But for your CV, you really want to have those kind of 3 short bullet points per leadership experience position. Those bullet points, I try to keep them to 1 line each, so not paragraphs each time. And it really is an editing job to catch those typos and make sure that you're being precise and concise with everything that you put on there. Does that answer your question, Jasmine? I think I went a little broad and then really narrow.
No, yeah. So that's part of the reason why I always dread writing my resume, is just because you have to be so careful with those mistakes, and sometimes you don't even know what they are. Like you said, you need to have someone else revise it for you. But I also want to jump back to one of the points that you mentioned in your response. You keep saying the word CV. So if you could sort of and I know Diane, she also asked a question. So if you could kind of differentiate between the CV and a resume.
Sure thing. So I think actually, so I'm originally European. I'm actually French. I grew up in Paris. And so I think this might be first off, a slight difference between European and in the US. In Europe, we typically use CV a little bit more. It's a Latin abbreviation. And CVs for me are very much that 1 page. My understanding is that in the US, you do use resume as something that is a little longer. But broadly speaking, it's the same thing. I would say the resume does have more information. And if you ever have any doubts as to what people are expecting, I would go with the shorter version because it's going to encourage you to be more precise and concise and really work on the wording. And if it is a kind of position, as I said, I think the only exceptions are ones where the industry demands kind of like a longer format, and that's what the hiring person is going to be expecting. One thing to keep in mind is that you can always ask the expectation of the person. You know, if you're applying for a role, there will definitely be a contact information, and it doesn't do a disfavor for you to politely reach out and just check in terms of the expectations that that office might have in terms of what they're looking for from you. If anything, it'll be seen as a good step that you're wanting to make sure that you're delivering exactly what's needed.
So we do have a question from Miss Patty, and it's asking, should you have different resumes for different industries?
Great question, Patty. So I think my answer there would be yes, absolutely. I think you have different resumes for every role or every job that you're going for. It's really a case of making sure that you're being as targeted in your descriptions of what you're doing as possible. You know, this is your opportunity to do the first handshake and say, if you're applying for a job in tech and you're talking about your great experience as an accounting person, that might not necessarily land unless you're able to turn around and say, for example, you managed the technical tool that you were using in accounting and you made some really great technical changes that had a really big impact on your organization. So I don't think the industry of where you got the experience from really matters. It just really is about making sure you're able to adapt how you talk about something for the person who's going to be receiving that.
We also got another question from Barb. Should you submit your resume as a Word doc or PDF? Does it matter?
Always a PDF, and yes, it matters. So the reason why everyone has different computers, everyone has a different version of Word. Some people might not even have Word anymore. The PDF is a way to kind of like freeze frame your Word document. It means that you can keep the formatting just as you like it. If you're like me, I spend hours formatting mine to get my dates aligned exactly right and my titles all pretty. And so you want to make sure that somebody isn't going to open that and it's all just going to move around the page. I think probably, I mean, I know we're not on video, but raise your hand if you've ever opened up a document and everything's just kind of danced on you. So you want to avoid that happening. So making sure that you do it as a PDF, and speaking very personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire work industry. When I get a Word document, I kind of see it as a like, you didn't go the extra step to make sure that you were putting your best foot forward. So both Word and Google, whatever they're called, Google Docs, give you the opportunity to download your documents as a PDF. So I would absolutely recommend you make the most of that.
So we have another question. What about putting the year you graduated from college?
I can tell that's a question from Cindy. Somebody concerned about years you went to college, huh? No, that is a great question. So personally, I put all of the dates on my resume and CV. I think it's an interesting way to kind of tell the story of your life. I think that there are some cases, if, for example, you've been out of work for some time, or potentially you've taken some leave for either building a family or illness or whatever reason it may be, there might be a gap in your CV, or there might be kind of date issues there. That's your decision as to whether you want to talk those away. Personally, I think it's always an interesting talking point to have those dates on there. They do tell a story of your life, and that's what we're looking for here. The other thing that I would consider is, especially for colleges, graduation years, especially in the States, they really matter. You know, somebody, if, you know, my spouse, she went to Bryn Mawr College here in the US, and they have, I think she's involved in like 40 or 50 Facebook groups for Bryn Mawr alums. And so being able to connect with someone and say, oh my God, I was in the same year, or I was 5 years later than you in graduating class, it allows you to have like a little recognition opportunity with a person who's looking at your CV, which I think is another point in general, is that, as I said, passion is what makes you interesting. Details are what makes you interesting. You never know what's going to make somebody tick and say, that got my attention. For example, when I'm looking through, if I see that someone went to high school in a different country, that grabs my attention because that's similar to my experience. I'm like, oh, I'm curious about this person. Or if they went to Model United Nations in college or high school, which some of you might be going to, you know, it gives you opportunities to have those conversation starters with whoever it is who's reading your CV. So I say the more detailed, the better in terms of conversation sparks. But ultimately, I think dates and locations is your personal preference. If there's anything in there that doesn't make you comfortable, your judgment call is the best.
So going into details and certain accomplishments, do you think, Ariba asked, should we put down any summer programs we got accepted into?
Yep, absolutely. I think especially early on, when you've not necessarily got I led an expedition in the Arctic and got funding of $250,000 to do so. You know, when your work experience per se is potentially a little bit more limited, just because you're younger, I think anything that makes you shine is worth including, which is why I use that trick of leadership experience, because anything can be leadership experience if you take the right attitude towards it. So yeah, I would put anything on there. As I said, I don't think you have to restrict yourself to the confines of what I did as a job. It's more, what about me is interesting? What about me is going to spark interest? What about me am I going to be able to talk about? Maybe tell an interesting story or a funny joke. I'm a fan of funny jokes. And really grab that person's interest. Make yourself memorable to them.
So obviously, you know, with a whole bunch of new opportunities that we have nowadays, we're constantly accomplishing new things, getting new opportunities for others. So how often do you think that one should be updating their resume?
So every single time that you apply for something, as I've said, and I think it bears repeating because I can't say this enough, make sure that you're renewing it for everything that you're using your resume for. In general, I would say that keeping that kind of running list, as I mentioned, where you're putting everything in, means that you're not forgetting something. I know when I was in college and high school, I was doing volunteering gigs and travel opportunities, and I was just saying yes to absolutely everything. And I don't necessarily remember the detail of all of those now. So it's kind of do yourself a favor and track things as you go. And then when you do actually get to the point where you have to build up your resume, you're going to find it much easier because you're going to have those kind of puzzle pieces that you can just take and select and build together.
Thank you. So thank you for all of the tips. Honestly, they're so helpful. Listening to it, so I was just thinking, without you can't really build a resume without having anything, any experience or anything at all. So my question is, how should us as students start approaching opportunities? How should we seek them to have things to write on our resume?
That's a great question, Jasmine, and I could probably go on about that for the next hour. I was someone who got very involved. I still am someone who gets very involved in lots of things. So I think the overarching thing to keep in mind is this concept of being time rich or time poor. And as busy as you are with your studies, I promise you that for the most part at the moment, most of you are going to be what's called time rich. So you may not have too many like tangible work skills in terms of being able to build pivot tables like that, or being able to code through Salesforce. But what you can offer is your time, which you have lots of. So that inherently means that you have more opportunities to get involved on a volunteering basis with a lot of different organizations, or find something to get involved you that really kind of gets you going. And so I think that that is something to keep in mind, is just say yes to every opportunity that comes through. Now, obviously, I know I can almost hear Leslie saying, you gotta watch out for you first, and mental health is really important. You never want to get to the stage where you're kind of burning out or feeling like you're overwhelmed. But if you're able to see these things come through and land on your desk and kind of a great opportunity come along, if you've got any niggling doubt, ooh, I don't know that I can do this, ignore yourself and go for it. Like jump 2 feet in, any opportunity is going to be great. I did write down ahead of the call some kind of little pointers for both high school and college, some things that jump out to me in terms of kind of tangible experience. Would it be useful for me to run through those?
Yes,
Yes,
definitely.
of course.
Go ahead.
Great. All right. So it'll be a little repetitive with some of the things we've gone over, but I think you only really understand something if you've heard it 3 times. So here we go. So first off, when you're in high school, so you might not have potentially mobility options of moving around. You might be kind of tied in with your community. So you may have just fewer opportunities to say yes to, fewer work opportunities potentially. So for me in high school, the 2 key skills that you should be really focusing on are leadership and teamwork. What I want to see, especially if I'm hiring kind of younger profiles, I want to see the kind of person that you are. I can't necessarily see the kind of employee you are, so I may as well focus on your kind of skills and attributes, who you are as a person. So really focus on any opportunities that you have to build those skills. And mostly in high school, the way you're going to do that is through volunteering. If there isn't anything in your area that gets you going, build your own. I promise you there is no better sign of leadership than you just kind of like getting up and saying, all right, I'm going to do it myself. And speaking as someone who has been involved in the 3rd sector, which is the charity sector, if some young, passionate person comes knocking and says, hey, I want to help, let's put together some scheme to get you more money or more volunteers or more anything that you need, they will say yes and welcome you with open arms, or tell you how you can help. So really look for any opportunities that you have of just getting stuck in there and getting some fun experience outside of just what you're learning at school. While you're in school, any team projects, any extracurriculars, any opportunities to get involved, like a high school debate club or anything like that. As I said, passion is what makes you interesting. So if you've got anything that you really love doing, keep doing it. You're going to be able to talk about that with your eyes lit up. And that, again, is what makes you interesting. And I think the last thing to note for high school is that if you do already know what you want to do, congratulations, you're not me. But really, you're going to want to find opportunities to get involved with your area of interest. So for example, if you want to go be a vet, then go and volunteer with a vet clinic or go and volunteer with a local cat shelter or something. Anything that kind of aligns with what you're going to be applying for at college is good because it's just going to create a narrative on your CV, on your resume. Now, moving on to college, I think you have a few more opportunities when you get to college in terms of doors opening. Here you want to kind of build up more experience that relates to your studies. So if you are taking a more focused field, like marketing, I think Jasmine, you mentioned that you were doing marketing. So anything in marketing, if it's volunteering with the local social media or the school's marketing, the school's kind of newspaper stuff, anything there that again creates harmony between what you're studying and then what you're using your free time for, helps build the narrative of who you are. Saying yes again to kind of like all opportunities and all groups within what's reasonable and within what you feel like you're able to do. Really here, you're just kind of, as you're time rich, you're just kind of collecting anything that you can then tell a story about yourself about. College is also, I would say, the point where you would start wanting to build your network. So you have heard, I don't know if you've heard, I feel like this is very much a like Six Sigma kind of training thing, but your network is your net worth. Now, I don't necessarily subscribe to this because I think it's a little absolutist. I think you're worth so much more than the people that you know. But I think the message here is that the people in your network, the people that you're able to reach out to and say, well, hey, I know Cindy or I know Diane at Go for the Greens Foundation. Those are the people who are going to really matter when you start going out into the world. Networking, I feel like that's a whole other session that we could do. It's not as scary as it seems. If you go in and you're thinking about just who you are, what are the things that you love, and feeling comfortable about talking about those, I promise you it's not as daunting as it may seem. My quick tip for networking is get your own business cards. Now, even if you've not got an employer, if you've not got something to put on, having something, if you're going to networking sessions, if you're going to conferences, if you're going to gatherings, whatever it is, that you're able to hand out. I know y'all are young whippersnappers, so I feel like it's more like Snapchat codes at the moment, or TikTok. I don't even know. But I still believe in business cards. I have mine on my desk at all times. And when I was 18, I moved to London and I created my own business cards that just said, hi, I'm passionate. I think it was literally, I'm passionate about tech and volunteering and activism. I would love to contact you, or I would love to talk more. And it had my name and contact information. It is just a thing that you can reach out to. And I promise, if you're the only 16, 18, 21-year-old in the room who goes up to an employer and says, hi, this is me, here's my contact card, you're going to stand out and they're going to remember you. And I think the last thing to note for college is college resources. There's going to be so many. In some cases, you're going to have these in high school too. There are so many resources, no matter where you are, that allow you to have resume building tips, or people who will help you with applications, or people who will help you even just in terms of your studies and what you're doing. Use these, lean into them. I was in my kind of job counselor's office probably once a week when I was at the Lancaster University, talking about what I wanted to do with my life. I probably had several meltdowns in her office about, I don't even know who I am and what I want to do. 10 years later, I'm a tech director at a global media agency, and I definitely still credit her guidance and support. So you will meet some of the best people in your lives in those offices. They genuinely want to help. They have a lot of resources. They get budget and funding specifically to help you. Go and use it. And I think I lied, actually. Here's the last thing. Focus on your grades. Don't forget that this is a wonderful education that you're receiving. And grades aren't everything. They certainly aren't a reduction of who you are. I know it might feel that way when you're in the middle of it, but doing your best and applying yourself in school is always, always, always a priority.
Thank you for your response. I have so many questions after that, but one of the ones that really sticks to me is, oh my gosh, I just had a brain freeze. I just forgot what I was gonna ask.
Don't worry at all. It happens.
Oh my gosh.
I think if I can come in while you gain your thoughts, the last point you made about your grades, before this, I was telling Jasmine that I had just jumped off a call with my counselor, and you know, it turns out that I'm missing a couple credits that I need in order for me to graduate with my associates. And so I was thinking about it, and my first 2 years of high school, I did not pay much importance to my grades, what I was doing. I mean, it was kind of just like, I'm just ready to become a junior, be a senior, graduate, all that good stuff. Like, I'm not going to pay attention. And so now I'm sitting here trying to catch up with everybody, you know, trying to raise my GPA, making sure that I have enough information to put on a resume in order for me to get internships and stuff like that. So I definitely think that's good advice to pay attention to your grades, because if you don't, then you're going to end up like me. Like you said, I think I'm about to have a meltdown as well, because it definitely is stressful when you don't pay attention to that. So
well, I think there's worse places than you can be than being like Leslie, who is a superstar and a personal hero of mine. So, Leslie, I'm sure you're well equipped. I'm happy to talk about it in more detail with you too. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think grades 10 years on aren't going to be the focus of you. For right now, I think it is kind of like a game you have to play into, is that you have to succeed. The rules are going to change when you go into business. There's going to be different KPIs, key performance indicators, that you have to measure up against. But yeah, at the end of the day, while you are in education, I think the point is to receive that education, broaden your learning, broaden your kind of understanding of things around you, and just being able to get that stamp of, yes, I did this and I did it well. It's always just going to work in your favor. I do think something to keep in mind is people are human at the end of the day, and they will understand. If there's something that causes you to have a bad year or a bad semester, people will understand. It's more important for you to get help first and get that support. Definitely don't work yourself into the ground for the sake of getting an extra point difference. I think at the end of the day, if you're able to go in and say, listen, yeah, my grades went down a little bit, I was having a really tough time at home or a really tough time with other stuff, people are going to understand. So at the end of the day, I think focusing on you and your well-being is the only thing that you really have to do for your whole life.
I got the question back.
Go for it, Jasmine.
So you brought up the point of networking and handing out business cards. So apart from submitting resumes to possible employers, where are some other places that you can give a resume, such as career fairs, things like that?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that question up, because I think it's probably the thing that I did the most in college was, as I said, say yes to everything and go to every single career fair that I could. You'll find that there's companies that do recruitments at your college or high school. You might have kind of consultancy firms. I know that at the London School of Economics, we had McKinsey feeling like they were here every other week, kind of looking for grads and post-grad opportunities. So take all of those opportunities to interface or connect with businesses. There will also be local career fairs. You know, there's nothing better than starting off work with someone who's local to your community. That's a really good story to build as well. So yeah, I think career fair is good. I personally am not a fan of kind of just uploading your CV onto a big CV website, because, and you'll have heard me say this so many times, you don't get to target necessarily for each job. So it's just kind of sitting there in the void, not really attached to anything. You can definitely use those sites to find jobs and then customize your CV and send it over, or your resume. But I personally have never had very much luck with that. I think the one space where it's appropriate to have your CV or resume at all times is your LinkedIn. and you may get many people who reach out to you based on what you've put on your LinkedIn. So that's a good place to keep updated. But yeah, I think those career fairs, any in-person connections that you can get are going to be so valuable.
Thank you. We
Hi, Abby. I just wanted to say thank you for all of that wonderful information. This is Billy.
Hi, Billy.
Sorry I was a little bit late checking in, but congratulations on all you've accomplished and sharing with Jasmine and Leslie. And did you girls, did you mention anything about pointers on resumes? We talked this past weekend, the three of us, and we talked, Jasmine has had as internship before, but Leslie hasn't. So we talked about positioning for getting internships. Have you covered that already?
Not necessarily in specifics. And Billy, it's great to hear your voice. And one of my best memories of Go for the Greens was kind of scheming with you about how we were going to get the best support for the girls who were there that year. And look, it's given me a lifelong wonderful mentee in Leslie. So your question was around how do you kind of get those internships in the first place? So
Right.
Jasmine, I think we kind of circled around that with our conversation just now, right? But putting yourself out there is really the key. Most of the opportunities that have presented themselves to me are not ones that I applied for. They're ones that kind of popped up in a conversation with the right person at the right time. And you won't know who that person is or what that time is unless you're there. And so really taking any chance to get yourself out there. Now, that was my experience definitely in Europe. I think in the US, there's actually a really, really developed network, especially in college. It's kind of like a machine. They want to put you through all of these opportunities. So for more specific things about your area or your interests, again, I would direct you towards your kind of college or career services within your high school or your college. They're going to have a good sense of what are the ones that are out there and available to you. However, I would also say that anything you find yourself, you're actually more likely to have a better chance there because that'll have been through a genuine human connection. And that network really matters. You know, you could reach out to Cindy, Diane, sorry for putting you on the spot, but like kind of reaching out and saying, hey, you know, all of these wonderful women business owners, aren't any of them looking for an intern at the moment? And that's how you use your network.
I believe there was a question, I think Diane asked it about references, which I think is what she meant. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I've got it highlighted right here, actually. Okay. Do you put references on your resume or do you say they are available by request? Great question, Diane. So what I would say is you can definitely put perhaps at the top, if you've got great references, then maybe that's your interesting tidbit. Personally, my preference is for those references to be on your LinkedIn. So if you know someone who you had either through an internship or a job or a volunteering opportunity, ask them to write a written reference for you on LinkedIn, because that's always going to be there. That doesn't go away. That means that if I'm just snooping around and looking at your LinkedIn resume, I can see your reference already. I don't have to pick up the phone. I don't have to send an email. It's right there. So I would definitely encourage you, if you've got those opportunities to get references, which you should always ask. I've changed my job 3 times now at the Social Element, and every change I've been like, hey, can you write a reference about that side of my job? Just making sure that you've got those milestones. And then I think it depends on how you apply. This might be one of those questions where you reach out to the hiring person and say, what are you looking for here? If it's an online form, they might ask you to list references directly in a field on the form. You can say available by request on your CV. I wouldn't necessarily include the resume on your CV or the reference on your CV kind of written out or anything. That's best for LinkedIn. And if they reach out asking for them, then obviously be ready to provide them. I think the only caveat to all of this is that if when you're applying, they say, please include references on your resume, then absolutely do as they say and follow their recommended format.
I'm super glad that you brought up LinkedIn, because it's definitely been on the rise, especially nowadays. It's basically your resume online. If you could sort of explain what LinkedIn is and sort of tell the difference between that and your resume.
Sure thing. Absolutely. Great question, Jasmine. All right. So yeah, so LinkedIn is kind of like the online business Facebook. It's where you go, you have your personal profile where just like on Facebook, you've got your photos and the things that you've done with your friends and great memories. It's that, but the professional version. And it works just the same as a social network. So there's a feed that you're able to post updates on and post photos. I know Go for the Greens post some sometimes, and it means that lots of people can interact. But more importantly, actually, I shouldn't say more importantly, because the feed is really great. There's also lots of groups on LinkedIn. Join any groups that you can. If there's an alum group for your high school, if there's an alum group for your college, join it now. You don't know where the people that you went to school with are going to end up. And if one of them ends up as VP or something or other somewhere you want to work, then reaching out and saying, hey, remember that fun time in the library, might really be a cincher for you. But ultimately, the main thing around LinkedIn is your personal profile. So your profile is the place where you can put every single little thing about you. My LinkedIn, if I were to print it out, would probably be 5, 6, 7 pages long. Now, that's not a reason for you to ramble. What you put on your LinkedIn should be the pretty concise bullet points that you work on so hard on your resume, but you can go into a little bit more detail. You can explain a little more. My CV is where I kind of have the one-liner. My resume is the one-liner. And then my LinkedIn is the like, go here for more information. If you want to have more information about like numbers or special elements of the project that I don't think maybe are relevant for the resume itself, I put them on LinkedIn. So it's your opportunity to be a little bit more expansive. It's your opportunity to have a more complete picture of who you are professionally. And the great thing about LinkedIn is that they don't discriminate between like your paid work experience or volunteering. You're able to customize the sections on your LinkedIn resume just the same as you are on your resume, where you can drag and drop and put things in different spaces. So I would really encourage you to make sure that your LinkedIn looks as good as your resume. If you don't have much on your LinkedIn, it's almost best to take it down. Like if I go somewhere and you don't have a profile picture or you've got spelling mistakes on your resume on LinkedIn or any of that, again, it's not going to show your best foot forward. So you want to make sure that it's your kind of like really polished, ship-shop shape LinkedIn presence of yourself. So do be careful, or not careful, be selective with what you put in there in terms of the details and stuff. But you do have more room to kind of present the picture of yourself.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, just because I feel that your resume might not be needed anymore. Maybe in the future people will only look at LinkedIn, just because I had an assignment where I had to create a LinkedIn profile. So yeah, that was definitely super helpful. Leslie, I believe you had a question. You're on mute.
Oh, Leslie, you're on mute. Zoom 101.
Sorry.
we all do it. Don't worry about it.
Oh gosh, that's embarrassing. Sorry. Okay, so just to start wrapping things up, since it's about to be 5, our last couple of questions are kind of together. So what kind of websites would you recommend to create your resume? And do you have any tips on writing your bullet points?
Ooh, that's a whole question in and of itself, but sure, let's go for it. And so without being tongue-in-cheek, I don't want you to take this as me being dismissive of your questions. Google is systematically the best website I have ever used when it comes to building my CV. I think that norms around CV building and resume building kind of change. You know, some cases, I think there were a couple of years where we all wanted to put photos on our resumes. And then a couple of years later, we were like, oh, no, let's not do that anymore. So by kind of looking on Google and looking at those first few hits, you're probably going to get some pretty up-to-date information. I think the thing to keep in mind, as always with Google, you want to look at the date. If it's something from 2014, maybe try and find something a little bit more recent. But there's a lot of information out there. LinkedIn actually has some fantastic resume building tips that are available just in their kind of like support sections. They're a really great resource there. And actually Microsoft Word and Google Docs themselves, they actually have templates for resumes that you can download. And increasingly, they even have tips and tricks about how to fill in those templates that you get. So you don't even have to build it from scratch. And I know that's not actually something that we really talked about, was kind of like the formatting of your resume. So let me do a tangent. That's really important too. You have to have it clear. If it's just kind of like a blocks of text, it gets really confusing to read. And I know that there's wonderful HR people who are more diligent than I, but I know that when I'm hiring for a quick turnaround project and I'm kind of taking a look at stacks of 50, 60 resumes, if I pick up a resume and I can't read anything, the font is weird, things aren't aligned properly, things are all over the place, I almost certainly am going to put it right back down because it's kind of too much for me to sit and focus and try and read it. Now, some HR people who are, hired and trained to do that, they might not take that approach. But personally, I like to kind of make sure that I'm hand selecting who's on my team. And so I have a say in hiring rules and hiring processes at least. And so having a really clear laid out format is really going to help you. It also helps you kind of encourage yourself to then be concise. Like I have my bullet points aligned in some way and the spacing set just right. But it also means that I have a little bit less than a line to work with if I'm working on that one line. And so it's a fun challenge because then I have to make sure that everything fits in the template that I have. But as I said, there's lots of templates out there and lots of ways for you to present that information. And then Leslie, the second part of your question was around how to build those bullet points.
Yes. Sorry, I was on mute again.
No worries at all. So try to stick to that one line. It's a really fun challenge. There are some situations where you might have 2 lines. In that case, I would encourage you to try and find a way to make it 2 bullet points. If you're talking about like a really big project, maybe it deserves 2 bullet points. I typically do between 2 and 3 bullet points per line item on my leadership experience. Maybe if it's my current one, I might have a 4 on there, or if there was really something really particular, but that should only be kind of like your star spotlight one that's on your resume, not all of them. Typically, you want to start your sentence with an action word, and this is where a thesaurus is going to be really useful for you. So thesaurus helps you find synonyms of words, so you can't start everything with managed, 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 managed. So I actually, I've got mine open right now. I can just scan through. I led, I managed, I developed, I delivered, I increased, I recruited, I created, I analyzed. So lots of action words there that I start my bullet points with. And that is going to pull me in because it means that immediately you were involved. Then, some other points about those: include numbers, include data, no wishy-washy stuff. Like I raised 10,000 pounds while I was in college for a local women's charity. You betcha that I've got 10,800 pounds right there on my resume. Or if, I decreased the amount of time that it took something because I implemented a great tech tool, I decreased the time by 50%. Include that. Those numbers stand out. So if you've got numbers, put them in. Early on, I kind of artificially, I never lied, but I would put in numbers such as I had 348 people working on this event that I ran. And so, you get that number in there. So those tangible experiences are really worth including. Yeah, I could go on about building those. I think there's all about, making sure that you're not presenting yourself in a support role, but show that you took action. It might take some wordsmithing to move things around to make sure that you're the star. If you had a great team who worked with you, that's fantastic. Shout out to the team. If you took any management or leadership role within that team, make sure that that's flagged out first.
Thank you so much for that. I needed this just because we are having an internship program over the summer. And so I have to complete my student profile and a resume. So this was definitely very helpful. And I think it's about time we wrap up. But I know that Barb asked a question about interview tips, but we will leave that for next session because it's a totally different session and we want you guys to come back. So we're going to leave it on a little cliffhanger. But I don't know if Diane wants to jump back in and finalize this. It was, like I said, it was very informative and I think very beneficial for everybody who was here. I lost track of what I was going to say. The advice that you gave us was definitely very helpful. So thank you for that. And that's
Sure
all for me. I don't know if Jasmine, you want to say something before we?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Like I said in the beginning, resume building is something I dread, but your advice was definitely great, and I will definitely take into account everything. Thank you so much.
I'm glad I could help. And so just to wrap up here, I don't know when this is going to be posted. I'm sure with the superstars on the call, it'll get sorted out quickly. I'd be happy to include a link on my LinkedIn there as well. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, please feel free to. One thing I will say about LinkedIn is don't just click the connect button. When you connect with someone on LinkedIn, you actually have a little box that allows you to add a text piece. Always make use of this. This is a whole other networking session. Yeah. Always make use of that. Say who you are, where we potentially met, or where you heard about me, and why you want to connect. And that way I have a little bit more information rather than just some rando in my inbox. But more than happy for any of you to reach out to me over LinkedIn and then just check in. And as I said, there are so many resources available, especially for people who lean in. It's just a case of finding them. And you are such a smart generation of young women and young entrepreneurs that are on the rise, and you're going to rule the world. So you'll have plenty of resources available to you as well.
Okay, with that, thank you so much, Abe. Thank you for being here, and we definitely look forward to having you back for another session. And Leslie and Jasmine, thank you for the interview questions. Really good stuff, really meaty. And Cindy, would you like to say anything as well?
I just want to say thank you. Abe, I had like 100 questions just for myself as a retired person. And
we can have a one-to-one, Cindy,
yeah,
whatever you need.
But this was another enlightening thing. And so thank you so much. And we will be posting it pretty soon. And if you're okay with this, we would probably like to have, Diane and I have already talked about this. We're going to start doing encore presentations. The one problem that we can say, and I hate to use that word problem, is that the children or the young ladies of today right now, they're all going through exams, and we got the college and this and that. And then the other thing that we have, that isn't a good word. So when you do your, what is it?
Thesaurus.
Yeah.
Thesaurus.
What is the word for issue that we have?
A challenge,
an
interesting obstacle,
the challenge that we have is we've got people from Canada on these calls. We've got people, so the time change. So we have to kind of figure out, which is why we put it on YouTube, because everybody, including these young leaders of tomorrow right now, they're 1 hour behind us, but the other folks that are in California or Nova Scotia or what have you. So maybe we can like tap into your mind, because you know you've gone globe.
Absolutely, happy to help. I think internet offers us many solutions to complex problems, including time zones. So we'll find a way. And Diane, I'd be happy to come back. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. I'm a chatty person by nature, so I tend to go on. But yeah, more than happy to jump in and support. I really, really admire all of the alums and all of the people who are in any way associated with Go for the Greens. You're in really great hands. So more than happy to step in and support.
Thank you, Abe. We appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm voting for you for